disconnection from the universe, disconnection from each other, disconnection from God, a sense of disconnection. The word health actually means whole. It comes from the same root word as whole. So behind illness, you will find spiritual disconnection first and foremost. This isn't our fault. We're born into this. We're born into a world where we have to fight for our existence. So first and foremost, we have to come to grips with the fact that we don't have a connection with our spiritual natures if we're dealing with a chronic degenerative disease. Secondly, we have to come to understand that our thoughts form our body. Every time you think a thought, a biochemical called a hormone is produced, and that hormone makes your body, for better or worse. Likewise with your feelings, your emotions. Emotions comes from the idea that energy has to be in motion, emotion. When we are stagnant in the way we feel, when we're stuck in some kind of emotional way of being, it will ultimately show up as a stagnation in the body. And it will ultimately show up as a slowdown in healing. Then we get physically ill. Then our symptoms manifest themselves in a physical way. The reason I think this is important is because I don't want you to think that I'm the kind of nutritionist or dietitian that says just take this vitamin or just eat this food. It doesn't work that way. We have to address all the dimensions of healing. That's all I'm going to say about that, but I want you to recognize that. Now, from a physical perspective, there is not a lot of things that can go wrong in the body. There's a lot of different places that things can go wrong in the body, but the biochemical mechanisms are always going to involve something being secreted in excess or something not being secreted enough. That's pretty much it. Fibers in the case of fibrosis or sclerosis, impaired healing in the case of something not being produced enough. In other words, all our diseases have the same thing underneath them, and it doesn't matter what our disease is, it matters that our disease is. It doesn't matter what we're sick of, how our sickness is showing up, it matters that it's showing up. The only people who care about special diseases are specialists, because they get paid based on a special disease, but they never make anyone better because the problem isn't the special disease, it's at the simple level underneath, and this is what Simplexity is about. So, my mission in life, if you're sick here, by the way, I want you to understand something. You don't have to be sick when you leave here, leave here after an hour, because the body's way is to heal immediately as soon as we make a commitment to do it. When you put your cigarette out, your lungs start to heal. When you stop eating the food that's causing you some kind of digestive distress, your intestine starts to heal. When you start to breathe correctly, you get more more oxygen in the blood immediately. So the healing process can begin immediately. And I'm going to give you information. This is my passion in life. This is what I love to do. I love to help people. It's my mission in life. It's what gets me up in the morning. And I have tons of great information if you're sick. And I can give you so much great information your head will swim. You'll be transfixed and entranced. I saw this when I started doing talks 20 years ago. I used to see in my mind's eye as I was talking, and I see it right now here. People's ears would be like, boop, 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 like this. Like it's a truth detector. We all have a built-in truth detector and a BS detector. And so the information I'm giving you, and as we can see the room is almost full here, obviously you're getting valuable information. But if you're sick, you have to contribute something. I can give you great information, and I'm committed to your healing. And some of you know you have my cell phone number, and I answer phone calls, and I do three-way phone calls, and I travel around the country, and I travel to Canada, travel to New Zealand, travel to Australia, and I do talks. This is my mission in life, and I can help you get better, but you have to bring something to the table, and that is belief. You have to believe it's possible that whatever your health challenge is, you can reverse it. And following that belief, you will have willingness. And you have to bring that to the table. If you're sick in any way, my promise to you is if you bring belief and willingness to the table, in combination with the information that I'm going to give you, which is incredibly simple and incredibly easy to understand, I am standing in front of you right now telling you 100% guarantee you will get better. 100% because it's the law. The law is, how the body works is based in the legality or the law of biochemistry. There are certain things that happen in your body, in my body, in everybody's body the same way. Which means if we understand how the mechanisms work and we leverage it correctly, we can automatically enhance the system. Automatically. And I'm guaranteeing you, if you're sick, and I don't care if it's arthritis or it's cancer or acne or psoriasis or whatever, I'm guaranteeing you with 100% certainty, if you employ even 60%, let alone 100% of what I tell you here today, and you do it with willingness and a belief that this is possible, you will get better. And by better, I mean you will get stronger. You will heal better. You will lose weight. Your emotions and your mind will work better. You'll have less anxiety and you'll sleep better. And it doesn't matter if your diagnosis goes away, because that's not the problem. The problem is the body's not performing, whether you have MS or whether you have acne. The body is not performing. It doesn't matter how it's not performing, it matters that it's not performing. So, first and foremost, I'm going to give you information, but if you want to heal, you have to have the belief that it's possible, and then you have to have the willingness to do what it takes. And I'm guaranteeing you, with my information and your belief and willingness, you will get better. 100% guaranteed. All right, so let's talk about the digestive system. We've got 12,800 different diseases, according to the World Health Organization. But really, there's only one disease. Oh, I know you've got MS, and you've got hidradenitis suppurativa, and ankylosing spondylitis, and Alzheimer's disease, and osteoporosis, and you name it. There's zillions of different ways the body can break down. But I have distilled it all down into one disease I call MBFA disease. Who knows what MBFA disease is? My body is falling apart disease. That's the only disease there is. It doesn't matter where in the body it's showing up. The fact of the matter is when we're dealing with a chronic long-term degenerative issue, our body's falling apart. And underneath all bodily breakdown, underneath all bodily dysfunction, if the body is not performing where it needs to be, no matter what the leaves are, the trunk and the roots are always in the blood. The blood is the one part of the body that runs from head to toe. It contacts every component. What are the tiny little components that make the body up? Anybody know what they're called? Cells, correct. And the object in life is to feed the cells. If you're healthy and strong and vital, your cells are getting everything they need. And if you're not healthy and strong and vital, your cells are not getting what they need. So understanding what the cells need becomes job number one if you're sick. Or if you're healthy and you want to stay healthy. The cells are delivered health through the blood. This is the purpose of the blood, is to feed the cells. Between the blood and the cells, you have everything you need to know about health and wellness. When the blood is dirty, the cells don't get what they need, we get sick. When the blood is clean, the cells, and packed with the resources the cell needs, the cell gets fed and it gets everything it needs. This is where the digestive system comes in. So all disease is cell disease. When they tell you you have lung cancer, you don't have lung cancer. When they tell you you have intestinal disease, you don't have intestinal disease. When they tell you you have a skin health issue, you don't have a skin health issue. Nobody has lung cancer, they have lung cell cancer. Nobody has a skin health challenge, they have a skin cell health challenge. Nobody has liver disease, they have a liver cell disease. At the core of all our diseases, a cell is not getting what it needs. It's not getting what it needs because the blood is not able to deliver it. All disease is cell disease. All cell disease is preceded by dirty blood. You guys, if you understand what I just said here, and by the way, does this sound medical? Does this sound health, like you need to have a degree to understand this? No. Does this sound complicated in any way? If you grasp what I just told you, you probably know more than most doctors. Because your doctor is busy treating the leaf, and the doctor is busy testing all the leaves. And he's trying to get numbers and seeing what your cholesterol is, and seeing what your blood fats are, and seeing what your sugar is. It doesn't matter if you're sick. We got to figure out why the cell is dirty and why the blood is dirty and what the cell isn't getting. So first of all, what does a cell need? Well, let's talk about the nature of a cell before we even do that. I always like to think of the metaphor raisin bread. We're all built like raisin bread. What are the two components of raisin bread? Raisins and bread. Raisin and bread. There's only two components in raisin bread. Likewise, our body, as complicated as it appears to be, is only made up of two parts. It's made up of raisins and bread. But we don't call them raisins and bread. We call them cells and stuff. Our body is made up of cells and stuff the way raisin bread is made up of raisins and bread. If we're sick, we got a raisin problem. Our raisins are defective. You see, the body is not quite like raisins and bread because the body is magical. Really, really is. It's miraculous. the true miracle of the body can be summed up if you understand the raisins are making the bread. Imagine you had these magical raisins, and you put them on the table, and you left them on the table overnight, and you came up the next morning, and those raisins turned into bread. And then you ate the bread, and you left some more raisins on the table, and the next day the raisins turned into bread. Raisin bread. That would be a miracle. That's the body. Except instead of the raisins making the bread, the cells are making the stuff. This is our body. This is how our body works. Our cells make the stuff as if we were magical raisins making raisin bread. When we're sick, something goes wrong with the process. The raisins are not healthy, so the bread becomes dysfunctional. That's what sickness really is. The cells aren't getting what they need. The bread becomes dysfunctional. Technically, it's called the extracellular matrix, if you're a scientist out there. Any healthcare professionals in this room, by the way? No? Yes? Nurse? What do you do?
No, not a nurse.
What do you do?
Office work.
Office work, okay. All right. In any case, the cell bread. The cells are making the stuff. We're sick, the cells aren't making the stuff correctly. It all boils down to the cells. The cells are getting fed via the blood. Between the interaction of the blood and the cells, you have everything you need to know to get healthy. Now, we're here to talk about digestion. I've not forgotten that, and I'll tell you how this all links in. There's only 3 things a cell needs. This is so cool because it means we only have to provide 3 things. If all disease is cell disease, if all disease is a reflection of a cell not getting what it needs, understanding what a cell needs becomes job number 1 if you want to get healthy. And there's only 3 things a cell needs. This is so cool. A cell needs, number 1, oxygen. Number 2, food, i.e. nutrition. And number 3, a clean place to do its work. That's all a cell needs. If you want to sum up the failure of modern medicine, I'm a registered pharmacist, and I've been studying medicine from a medicinal standpoint for 30 years plus. If you want to understand the failure of modern medicine in a nutshell, here it is. There is nothing, all disease is cell disease, and there is nothing in a doctor's magic bag of tricks that can ever help a cell. The only thing a doctor can do to a cell is drug the cell, poison the cell, or radiate the cell or remove the cell. Drug the cell, radiate the cell, remove the cell. That's it. A cell only needs 3 things, and that's the core of disease. And there's nothing in the medical model's bag of tricks that can do anything for a cell except kill it, radiate it, or remove it. Do you understand this? If you get that, then you know you never need to go to a doctor unless you have some kind of acute injury. And that's, by the way, where killing a cell or removing part of the body or stitching part of the body come in handy. Heroic medicine is a true miracle, a man-made miracle. The idea that we can stitch the things back on that we can stitch. You know, they do face transplants now. Have you heard of this? Pretty soon they're going to be doing brain transplants. There's amazing things that heroic medicine can do. But from a chronic, long-term breakdown, degenerative standpoint, which is most of our health challenges, there is nothing the doctor can do. And I'm not saying that because I hate doctors. I have friends who are doctors. I'm telling you because the model cannot work. It is flawed at its outset because a cell will not take the medicine willingly. But it doesn't matter because all a cell needs is food, oxygen, and a clean place to do its work. Now, when a cell does not get food, oxygen, or a clean place to do its work, eventually it dies. First it becomes dysfunctional, then it dies. When a cell dies, it opens up and it leaks all of its contents out. And all of the contents of a dead body, whether it's a dead body like a human body or an animal body, hi there, a dead body like a human body or an animal body, or a dead body that's like a cell, are poisonous. This is why we bury our dead. This is why we cremate our dead. This is why there's not dead bodies lying around, because they're spewing out acids and enzymes and toxins. Well, likewise, a cell is like a miniature version of a person, and when a cell dies, it too spews out its contents. And these contents are very toxic to the body, so the body has evolved a very interesting system to protect itself. It literally will build a wall, a microscopic wall, around those dead cells. Around that dead cell, or however many dead cells it is. It will protect itself by sequestering that area, like building a beaver's dam or an airbag around that area. We have a very interesting word to describe this airbag or this beaver's dam that you all have heard. What's that word? Anybody know? It's called inflammation. This is what inflammation is. Now, when we hear the word inflammation, and you probably heard it a million times, you probably heard it a dozen times today. When we hear the word inflammation, we tend to think of a black eye, or maybe a swollen ankle, or maybe a broken bone somewhere. The puffiness is characteristic of inflammation, and this is true. That is what inflammation is. In fact, what's happening when you have a swollen elbow, if you fall on your elbow, is your body has built a little airbag, a little beaver's dam to protect that area, to sequester it from the good tissue and keep it nice and cushioned so you can't damage it any further. That's called macro inflammation. We never say the macro part, but that's really what it is. It's a large-scale inflammation. Well, guess what? That same beaver's dam, that same protective response that keeps your elbows sequestered, your damaged elbows sequestered from the rest of your body, occurs at the level of a cell. And when a cell dies, the body protects itself by creating a micro-inflammation around that tiny little area to protect itself. That's a very important thing, and we want to have inflammation. And anti-inflammatories are very bad drugs because the inflammatory process is critical for the body to protect itself. You need inflammation. However, when lots of cells are not getting fed, or lots of cells are not getting oxygenated, or lots of cells don't have a clean place to do their work, they're accumulating poisons, lots of cells start to die. And then the body has to put lots of inflammation. When you have an inflammatory wall, microscopic as it may be, can you picture this inflammatory wall in your head? It's made up of fibers, and it's made up of fluid, and it's made up of almost exactly like a beaver's dam. When you have one or two of these little inflammatory barriers, that's not too much of a problem. But when you start to get lots of these inflammatory barriers because lots of cells are not getting fed, or lots of cells aren't getting detoxified, or lots of cells aren't getting breathed, what ends up happening is you get lots of these beaver's dams. And because these beaver dams are creating a wall around that damaged area, oxygen cannot get through. Food cannot get through. And toxins cannot get out. So while this little beaver's dam is functional when it happens once or twice or three times, when it happens over the course of months and years and decades, you get lots of these beaver's dams and lots of areas where oxygen can't get through and food can't get through and toxicity can't get out. And what then happens is more cells start to die. And of course, then the body creates a beaver's dam around those cells, and then more oxygen can't get through, more food can't get through, and more toxicity can't go out, and more cells start to die. So you get another inflammatory wall. This represents the biochemical mechanism for the downward spiral of chronic degenerative disease. What you should now be starting to get a picture of is that your diseases do not occur at the level where you see them. They occur at the level where you cannot see them, at the microscopic level. So now your next question should be, how is it that the cells don't get fed? How is it that the cells don't get breathed? How is it that the cells don't get detoxified or cleaned out? And this is where dirty blood comes in. You see, once the blood starts to get clogged up with dirt, and I'll tell you how it gets dirty here in a moment, it can no longer move effectively. One of the first things that happens when the blood can no longer move effectively is your electrical energy drops, because as your blood is circulating through your body, it's generating an electrical charge. Scientists call this a zeta potential, and if there's any electrical engineers in this room, they'll tell you that when you combine minerals with fluid, and you move the fluid and the minerals, you generate an electrical charge. And so as the blood's starting to get sluggish and slow, the electricity of the body is starting to run down. But even more fundamentally, at the cellular level, as the blood's movement, the blood circulation slows down, nutrients are no longer delivered. Oxygen is no longer delivered, and toxins are no longer removed. So all disease is cell disease, no matter what that disease is. The cell disease is always a reflection of starvation, suffocation, and toxification, leading to inflammation, leading to more starvation and suffocation and toxification, ad infinitum, on and on and on it goes. And all cell disease is preceded by dirty blood. So your next question should be is, how the heck does my blood get dirty? Yes? Hello?
Yes.
Are you out there? Am I speaking Japanese? You guys... Seriously, let's make this interactive. Am I making sense so far?
Yes.
If you're sick, it's a cell issue. If you have a cell issue, it's due to starvation, suffocation, toxification, and inflammation, which creates a downward spiral of disease. If your cells are not getting fed or oxygenated or cleansed, this is preceded by a sticky, clogged blood system. Thus, the importance of understanding how the blood gets dirty. And remember, we are here to talk about the digestive system. This is why the digestive system is so important. Because with some slight exceptions, such as if you're sticking things right into your blood, if you're an IV drug user, you're been vaccinated perhaps, or sometimes if you're breathing in mold occasionally, or perhaps you're working in a coal mine and you've got all kinds of toxins coming in, for the vast majority of us, the most important link between the blood and the outside world is the digestive system. When I talk about the primal nature, the fundamental nature of digestive health, I'm not telling you this as some kind of diet guru, because I'm not. If you put an apple pie right here, and I haven't eaten today, I will eat half of it with my hands. I won't even wait for the fork. I'm not kidding you, I've done it. All right, so I'm not a health nut. I'm not a diet nut. That's not how I look at the world. I'm simply a biochemist who understands how the body works and understands, because I've seen people for 30 years, thousands upon thousands of people. I understand, as it says in the Bible, without being dramatic, my people perish for lack of knowledge. And all I'm doing here is sharing this with you so you understand that if you're sick, you do not have to be, and there's nothing a doctor can do for you, but there's lots that you can do. So let's get this idea of the digestive system and the importance of digestive health and the importance of food being something about being a good person, all right, or about following the rules. That's not what this is about. This is simply to provide you with options if you're sick. That having been said, if you recognize that all disease is cell disease, if you recognize that the cell only needs three things, if you recognize that those three things are a function of the blood, then you can easily understand that if the blood is dirty, something will go wrong. The blood gets dirty at the level of the intestine. This is the interface between the outside world and the inside world. You know, when you eat a food, it's not even part of you until it gets through the intestine. The digestive tract is a tube that's in the center of your body that is segregated from the rest of your body. The ancient Greeks used to think that the digestive tract was another animal that lived inside our bodies. Why do you suppose nature in its infinite wisdom, the divine force in its infinite wisdom, would segregate the digestive tube from the rest of the body? What would be the function of this? What is it? Protection. But how so? If you eat the wrong thing, if you eat the wrong berry, you're in the African savannah, you put a berry in your mouth, it's separated from the rest of your body, it's a good thing. Your body can purify it, it can vomit it out if it has to vomit it out. It can create mucus around that area so that the berry or the splinter or whatever it is that you ingest that you should ingest would somehow not get into the body. So the body has evolved a system where the tube that we call the digestive tube that runs from your mouth to the other end is not part of the rest of your body. It's segregated. It has its own brain. They call it the second brain. Try not to vomit sometime. You ever experienced this where you have to throw up and you can't? You can't. Try not to have diarrhea sometime. Your digestive tract has a mind of its own, literally. It has a brain of its own. It's called the second brain. It's its own nervous system. And this is a very functional thing. So, food, once we eat it, is not part of us until it makes it past the intestine. The intestine has guards on it. How many of you guys saw the movie Studio 54? Ever heard of Studio 54 in New York City? Remember Studio 54? No? Come on, raise your hand if you have. Let me see. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, Studio 54 is a really cool nightclub in New York. And all the kids from Connecticut and New Jersey and New York and all the area states, they would come to New York City every day to go to Studio 54, every night to go to Studio 54. It's a cool place to be. And Studio 54 is famous for not letting everybody in. The owner would stand up on a big chair, he's a little guy, and he'd stand up on this big chair and he'd point to people. And he'd go, you, come on in. You, come on in. If they're pretty or they're dressed nice or they looked interesting, you, come on. You, back to Jersey. You, get a haircut. You. Yeah, he'd just like select people to come into Studio 54. And Studio 54 is a really cool club because the people who got there were hand selected. Well, that same hand selection process occurs at the level of the intestine because your blood is the best nightclub on earth, at least for us. If a nightclub, it's important for the owner of a nightclub to select the right people to come into the club. It's that much more important for the right foods to get selected to go into your blood. And nature has equipped the intestine with guards, with bouncers that say, you, come on in. you, back to Jersey, so to speak. In other words, food has to be vetted before it gets into the blood. Food is not permitted entrance into the Holy of Holies, the sacred space, without being vetted and purified. And this vetting process detects enemies, it detects particles that are too large, and it detects friends. And it lets the friends in and the particles that are too large out, and the enemies keeps the enemies out as well. When it is healthy. Over the course of time, as our standard Canadian diet, the standard American diet's really cool because it's called the SAD, right? You can't do that in Canada, but there's a reason for that. It is SAD, and its SCD is just as sad as the SAD. All of us here in the West, as our input of nutrition starts to become compromised, parts of the body break down. All disease is cell disease. We don't get the right nutrients in the body. Parts of the body break down. Intestinal cells are no different. Over the course of time, what ends up happening is you get little breaks in the levels of the intestine. Little holes start to form. Literally, little holes start to form at the level of the intestine. When little holes start to form at the level of the intestine, food particles that used to not be able to get into the blood because they were too big, because they were being vetted, being checked, their IDs were being checked, and they were foreign, they weren't good, they were being sent out, they had to go back home to New Jersey. Over the course of time, as you get those little holes, those bad guys start to go in through the back door. They start to go in through the holes. Now the bloodstream abuts right up against the intestine, and what's supposed to happen is the food is supposed to only go in carefully through the intestine after it's been purified, after it's been vetted, and it's supposed to enter in very carefully. But as holes start to form, the little food particles sneak into the back door and they get into the blood. Therein is the beginning of all chronic degenerative disease. It's called leaky gut syndrome. And I'm sure many of you have heard this, but what you have not heard is that everybody has it. It's not something you need to be tested for. It is the all the time, 100% guaranteed precursor to all chronic degenerative diseases. So if you have arthritis, you got leaky gut syndrome. If you have anything where the body doesn't get better, you got leaky gut syndrome. If you got cancer, you got leaky gut syndrome. If you got Alzheimer's disease, you got leaky gut syndrome. Assume you do. And you can test this yourself, and I'll show you how to test this here in a second, but right now I want to tell you how this whole thing happens. Because we all have a digestive tract, obviously, but we don't know what our digestive tract necessarily does or how it works. This is why 500,000 gallbladders are removed out of Americans every year. Probably the situation is worse here. This is why doctors say we'll just take a little piece of your intestine and you'll be fine. This is why we feel comfortable when a surgeon or a physician says we got to remove part of our digestive system and we just say whatever, because we don't know what the heck it does anyway. So understanding how this whole process works becomes important. The digestive system starts, where does the process of digestion begin, by the way? Where?
Mouth.
Mouth? No. Begins in the brain. Yes, if you were to sit here and think of a lemon, a nice yellow lemon, and you think about cutting it, and you think about squeezing the lemon and putting it in your mouth, your saliva will start to percolate. Which is why, by the way, you never want to eat when you're in a meeting, or when you're in the car, or when you're on the phone. Because digestion starts in the brain, and if you're not focusing on your food, immediately you will not digest your food as effectively.
Wow.
This is why ancient cultures, and not even ancient cultures, but it started with ancient cultures, and we today say grace before we eat. When you say grace before you eat, and thank God, or thank the life force, or thank nature, whatever you want to call it, for the food, you're placing attention on the food. This is why it's so helpful to chew, because as you're chewing, you're placing attention on the food. This is why we have something called fast food. Fast food is food that, not because it's not called fast food because they make it fast, it's because we eat it fast. Because when we eat fast food, we have to keep eating. Because we're not satisfied because we don't digest our food. If you paid attention to your McDonald's hamburger, not only would you not eat two, you probably couldn't even finish one. Especially if you looked at it. Never look at the McDonald's hamburger. Why do you think they have to wrap it up like it's a Christmas present? You think it's a toy. Oh, it's Christmas. Shh. The sound is even planned. So you think it's Christmas and you forget what you're eating. When you pay attention to your food, you'll eat less food because your digestive process will work better. So the first thing we do is pay attention to our food. But if we don't understand that digestion begins in the head, it begins in the mind, immediately we got strike one. By the way, when you say grace before you eat food, you actually activate something called your rest and digest nervous system. Who's heard of that term? Right? The rest and digest, what's the technical name for the scientists who think that that's silly? What's the technical name? The parasympathetic nervous system is activated by gratitude, by appreciation, by love. This is the spiritual connection again. By placing attention on our connection with the world, on how safe we really are, our parasympathetic, rest and digest, feed and breed, actually, nervous system is activated. So when we place attention on our food, number one, the digestive process begins, and you can experience this for yourself. You'll salivate when you think about certain foods. And secondly, we activate our rest and digest nervous system. If you leave right now, you now have a powerful tool for improving your digestive system and thereby improving the health of the blood. The second step, as some of you said, is the saliva. There are enzymes in the saliva that begin to break the foods down. In combination with chewing action, the enzymes in the saliva and the chewing action begin the breakdown process of foods, and now large pieces of food are broken down into particles. Not big, not small particles, certainly not small enough to enter into your blood, but they're starting to get broken down. The food goes down your gullet, it goes into through the esophagus, it comes to the stomach. At this point, there's a little piece, a little muscular opening and closing area right at the juncture of your esophagus and your stomach. This little juncture is called the LES, technically, the lower esophageal sphincter, for those of you who are scientifically minded, but the LES, it opens and closes. If you have heartburn or acid reflux, you got a problem with the opening and closing. You do not have an acid problem. And one of the dumbest drugs you could ever take is Prilosec, or for that matter, Tums, because your body needs acid, as we'll talk about here in a second, and you don't have an acid problem. If you have reflux disease, you have a sphincter problem. We'll talk about that here in a second. Anybody know this, by the way? Okay. Food goes through the sphincter, it goes into the stomach. At the point it enters into the stomach, it has more enzymes. Enzymes are powerful, powerful chemicals that you can actually use to clean things with. In fact, if you're using Tide or laundry detergent that's really high-end, they put enzymes in it. Have you ever noticed, and now with enzymes, contains enzymes. Enzymes break things down. The stomach also has acid in it. Between acid and enzymes, the breakdown process begins in earnest at the level of the stomach. And the stomach, in addition to having acid and enzymes, is moving. It's churning, and it's grinding. And so the food particles the foods that has begun to become particleized at the level of the chewing and the saliva now becomes further crushed. In fact, it gets turned into a liquid. It gets crushed so fine, it turns into a soupy mass. Anybody know what that's called? Chyme, exactly, C-H-Y-M-E. It's called chyme. And by the way, this is why you want to drink water with your meals. See, you hear all the time, don't drink water with your meals, but these are people that don't understand that your food has to get turned into a soupy mass. The liquefaction of the food supports the digestive process. And you'll find, because of this, that if you're drinking with your meals, not only are you digesting your food better, but you're eating less food. Anything that helps you access nutrition from food will allow you to eat less food for people who can't stop eating. Now, so far so good. We've thought about our food. We've crushed up our food at the level of the mouth with enzymes and with chewing action. The food has gone into the stomach and the maceration and grinding process has begun in earnest. Now we come to the key point in the digestive tract. This next step is the most important part of the digestive process, and it's the most important part of digestive health. As soon as the food enters into this, passes through the stomach, or leaves the stomach, enters the stomach, it's now chyme, and because it's been swimming in an acid bath, it is now acidic. It will leave the stomach and it will enter into the small intestine. And as soon as it enters into the small intestine, the coolest thing happens. One of the coolest processes in all of biochemistry occurs right at this point. So the acid food that has been now crushed up, it's like a soupy mass called chyme. It leaves the stomach, it enters into the intestine. As soon as it enters into the top of the intestine, it gets hit with a blast of bile from the liver and from the gallbladder. And then it gets hit with another blast of pancreatic enzymes from the pancreas. And the two liquids that come in from the gallbladder and the liver, that is called bile, and the second liquid that comes in from the pancreas, that's called pancreatic juices, have a high pH. They're alkaline. You probably heard this term alkaline. Does anybody know what happens when acid hits base or acid hits alkaline? Do you ever do an experiment when you were a little kid where you take something acidic like lemon juice and mix it with baking soda and you get a little fizzing action? Do you know if you have grimy grease on a pan and you put a little baking soda on it and then put some vinegar on it, what happens? Fizz! And all of that greasy, grimy, sticky stuff comes off the pan much more easily. The same thing happens at the level of the stomach and the intestine. The acid chyme drops into the intestine, the alkaline bile and the alkaline pancreatic juices hits that acid chyme, and you get fizz. And all of that juice, all of the nutrients from that chyme is released, especially the fatty nutrients. At that point, the fatty nutrients have been released, the food is all particleized, it now enters into the intestine, and the job of the intestine is to pull all the nutrients into the blood. The nutrients have all been released by the acid, first by the saliva, and then the acid in the stomach, and then the enzymes, and then the bile, and then the pancreatic juices. You can see all the different steps that have to take place here. If you have any problems anywhere along this pathway, you are now going to start to get not completely or incompletely digested food particles. Now, if you already have a leaky gut and you have incompletely digested food particles, you're going to have a problem. Under healthy conditions, all the nutrients that are in that food are now able to be released carefully into the blood through the intestine. But if you have leaky gut syndrome, or you're not making enough stomach acid, or you're not making enough digestive enzymes, or you're not chewing your food properly, or there's any dysfunctions at the level of the gallbladder or the liver, or there's any problems at the level of the pancreas, the particles aren't going to get digested properly, and big chunks of food are going to enter into the digestive tract. Now, there's another component that's involved as well, because at the level of the intestine, there's further processing of nutrients that are going on. Not necessarily food so much, or a little bit of that, but mostly at the level of the intestine, you're producing nutrients that are important for keeping the digestive lining healthy. Those nutrients are made by living creatures that don't even know we exist, but live in the intestine in such density that there's 10 times more of them than there are of us. What are those little creatures that live in the intestine called? They're called bacteria, or probiotics, we call them. Good bacteria. These good bacteria have many roles to play, but one of their most important roles is to make the intestine healthy. If we're dealing with any issues that involve these good bacteria, our intestinal health will be further compromised and more food particles will enter into the blood through the intestine. You guys, this is all disease I'm talking about. Every single one you can name. There's no such thing as a chronic degenerative disease that is not preceded by some kind of breakdown at this level. And this is why the digestive system is so important. It's not important because we're good people or bad people, or there's good foods or there's bad foods. And we have to stop eating the sugar and the chocolate, and we can only eat green beans and lima beans and broccoli. It's not because of that. It's because logic tells you. Logic, not science, not medicine, not health. Logic tells you that the only place the blood can get contaminated is at this level. And if you understand that all disease is cell disease and all cell disease is preceded by dirty blood, this area becomes vital to work on. Now, once the nutrients enter into the intestine, the stuff that isn't selected for or isn't vetted goes through the large intestine and it gets excreted out of the body. If over the course of time, too much of the wrong things are getting into the large intestine that the body isn't using, the large intestine can also become wounded. When the large intestine becomes wounded, it does the same thing we do when our arm is wounded. We don't want to move it. If you hurt your elbow, you're like, I can't move my elbow. You intuitively know you don't move your elbow. If it gets really bad, they put a cast on it, or a sling so you can't move it. When an area of the body is injured over and over and over again, it doesn't want to move. When that happens at the level of the large intestine doesn't want to move. Over the course of time, as our large intestine is bombarded over and over and over again with foods that weren't accepted at the level of the small intestine that the body wants to get rid of, the large intestine immobilizes. It stops moving. What do we call that? Constipation. We have, and I know in the United States, we got an epidemic of constipation. They wanted to have, I don't know, you probably heard this, an Ebola thing. There was a couple years ago, the whole Ebola thing. They wanted to have, it was in the press and newspapers, everybody's worried about Ebola. They wanted to have an Ebola czar. You know, every time there's a health problem, they want a czar, a drug czar, a cancer czar, Ebola czar. They want an Ebola czar. I was thinking in my head, because I've been doing this for so long, we don't need an Ebola czar, we need a constipation czar. Because Ebola is just hypothetical. Constipation is real. And it's a sign that the large intestine has been traumatized. It's now not moving because it's so traumatized. So now you have a little understanding of how the digestive process or digestive system is put together. And if you understand that all disease is cell disease, and all cell disease is starvation, suffocation, and intoxication, and all cell starvation, suffocation, and intoxication is the result of dirty blood. And the only way the blood gets dirty is by somehow the food that we're eating is not getting digested properly, and toxins are leaking into the blood. Now you can understand how critically and how vitally important it is to focus on digestive health, first and foremost. And this is where the master cure for all health challenges begins. Now remember, you got to bring belief and willingness here. Now I'm not asking you just to believe everything I'm saying, and a scientist never, but a true scientist, and we should all be scientists,